I am your host, Jason Miles, and this is Revolution Podcast. And this is the Wednesday Free Show. Call it the Wednesday Free Show because this is from our Saturday Free Show. And one thing we're going to be pushing a little bit more in 2022 is collaborative efforts with other leftist podcast hosts. And one of the people that came on, actually wasn't on the show they were on it. I was in the middle of relocating at the time, getting ready to relocate, was Pat from the Hoot and Holler podcast based out of the Ozarks, and Djene Bajalan, because he lives in Springfield, Missouri. Got to know the show well and hooked up a show a few months ago. And while I was, trying to get stuff together for my move south, I had the show on. I was watching. I was like, wow, this is super good, super interesting. So I was excited to meet Pat. I met Pat and his partner. And we had a good conversation about organizing in rural America, and bigger than that, because we've had a few shows about organizing in red states. We had Luke Mayville on talking about getting legislation passed, progressive legislation passed in very red Idaho, not just Boise, but the rural parts of Idaho. And we talked about something that you might hear us say constantly on this show, which is building cadre. Being good neighbors. Infiltrating spaces that have been totally dominated by the right. And we also talked about something that I will be talking about in my part 2 to my I Was a Teenage Anarchist piece. Which is, there's a lot of focus on federal politics. And when you look at the kind of infiltration the right has done, and this is taking place over a long period of time, but getting control at a local level, from school boards to the mechanisms of who's controlling, who's watching who vote, police departments, the judiciary. As we stay focused on the Supreme Court, we forget all the other courts, the appellate courts, that are so captured by the right. So we talk a lot about in this episode, what does it look like? What does mutual aid look like? So enjoy this episode with the Hoot and Holler podcast. And we will be having them back on. And we were talking off air about our potential podcast summit in Hotlanta. That music means I've been talking too long. If you want to watch the show live, it's every Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. YouTube.com/This is Revolution Podcast, and I am out.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to many of you. I am your host, Jason Miles, and this Revolution Podcast. If you are new to the show, please hit the like button, the subscribe. We really appreciate it. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. Hit the bell so you're reminded whenever we go live, as we're constantly adding new programming to the channel. That being said, there's a lot we want to cover today. Sadly, our normal Saturday crew co-host will not be with us today. He had some family obligations to attend to. So there's going to be no Marcus today. But make sure you go follow Marcus on his channel on Twitch, Left Flank Bets. Twitch.tv/Left Flank Bets. All right. Now let me bring in my co-host, my homie, my dog. He is the man of the Mau Mau Hour. He is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. What's up? What's up?
What's going on, man? What's up? How are you? I say this morning because it is morning here. I slept in a little bit, sadly. How are you feeling?
Feeling good. It's been morning till about 6 minutes ago.
Okay, well, fair enough. And we do have someone we've been talking a lot about with us who has not been here. He has been back in his native homeland, the United Kingdom. So very, very special applause for the creator of the new opening, Mean Djene Bajalan.
Greetings, everybody. Greetings from the glorious Venice of the North, Kingston upon Hull. We have beautiful weather, we have rain, we have gray skies, and we have fish and chips. So yeah, all is good in the homeland. Everybody is as cheerful as always.
I talked to Djene. The reason why I slept in is because Djene Bajalan, while he's in the UK, is 8 hours ahead of the rest of us. And what's funny is there's a group chat that we're all on, and I never turn off my notifications. I don't know why. And most of the people on the group chat are in the UK. So at like 1 a.m., Djene was just firing away messages. And the ding, ding, ding woke me up. And so Djene and I talked way too early in the morning. And I got to see how beautiful it was in Hull, which was kind of like, wow, it looks so nice this time of year, because I have been in the UK and the weather usually sucks.
Yeah, you've got a lot of UK experience, right? Touring. You've seen the lovely city of Bath.
I was in that motherfucker for like 3 months. Taking the buses everywhere.
Well, I've taken the bus. It was a great experience. Zal came with me on the bus. We went to town. We went to Primark.
And then, I miss Primark. Primark is like cheaper than H&M.
Primark's the bomb, man. I got myself some Call of Duty underwear on sale. So I was very pleased with that, because all the ladies love Call of Duty.
Call of Duty underwear basically guarantees that you are a bachelor that has a horribly dirty apartment and you will live alone forever.
Yeah, probably.
The more you know. But Primark used to smell like fake leather shoes. Does it still smell like fake leather shoes?
It smells like fake leather shoes. It's got loads of graphic T-shirts everywhere. It's whole downtown is looking pretty desolate. I think COVID's kicked Hull in the nuts. I went to the bank to check my UK bank account, and it was like going into the future, because there was like no one there. It was just all like machines, and I'm like, wait, where is everybody? And this woman's like, well, we don't have any tellers after 12 o'clock. And it's like,
whoa,
who do I talk to? I need an adult. They're like, do you have the app? I'm like, no, I don't have the app. And they're like, do you have a phone? I was like, yes, I have a phone. And they were like, do you want to download the app? I was like, if I had the app and I wanted to download the app, I wouldn't be in the freaking bank, right? So they sat me down, and sorted out my business at the bank. But it took a long while. I don't think they've seen people there. They're like feral, I think, at
That's
Barclays Bank.
insane.
It's really weird. And what else is going on in Hull? Apparently, and I haven't seen it, they have a German kebab shop.
Really?
Yeah, which is
kielbasa with your kebab.
Apparently it's doner kebab done in the German style, which is different from the
does that mean
British.
it's gross?
No, the German style is actually the better style. In Britain, we have something we call the elephant foot, which is basically just a giant sausage of lamb meat that they shave
That's
off
Pascal's nickname in the hood.
for a very different reason, obviously. But they have it's like the German one is apparently like shawarma more, so it's good. But the Middle Eastern shop is much better than in Springfield, I will say that. And there were a lot of Kurds and Poles interbreeding. I noticed a lot of interbreeding taking place between the Kurds and the Poles.
Oh, speaking of interbreeding, let's bring on our guest from the great state of Missouri. They have a wonderful podcast. I shouldn't say did I say wonderful podcast? That makes it sound like they talk about knitting and shit and different ways to fix your engine. It's actually a very, very good show, extremely informative. The last time this guest was on the show, I was not on, sadly. And an amazing conversation was had. The amount of local history that these two have between them is fascinating. But what we want to talk about is mobilizing and building a strong left in red places, because you usually have to root those movements in the working class, not just in figures. So let's bring in, you know him as Pat Squash, much like the Sasquatch, and Harvey Day. Pat and Harvey of the Hoot and Holler podcast. Give it up, everybody.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good night.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to the glorious world of the This Is Revolution podcast, and I hope everything is good in Springfield. Hasn't burned down while I've been away.
Has not burned down. They closed down the schools for 2 weeks, but
No,
I wouldn't say
shit.
things are good, but
yeah,
They closed down the schools, huh?
yeah.
Yeah.
They had,
Time out. Let's talk about this for a second. Now, I was watching some person like us that does the news clip shit, and they'll like take a clip of something that somebody else clipped, and then they'll talk about it and for a long time and yell at somebody. So there was a clip of a lady at a school board meeting. I don't know where it was, and she was like, "If you make my child wear a mask, I just want you to know I'm bringing all my guns. I'm bringing all my guns to the school." And then they go, the masked city council school board people were like, 3 minutes is up. Your 3 minutes is up. You have to leave now. Your 3 minutes is up. And lady goes, okay. And she just left, and nobody tripped. This chick said, I'm going to bring all my guns to the school over a mask. So you're saying school got shut down. So please, someone wrote guns and grits in the chat. That's fucked up, but it's funny. They don't go together.
They do in Mike Huckabee's world.
Before you answer that, do you put sugar on your grits?
it depends on when I'm eating them.
Oh,
I like savory grits.
I like savory. I like sweet. It's just, I'm not as rigid as some people on.
This is like the third time we've had this grits conversation. Where else have we had this grits?
I don't know.
People keep asking us how we take our grits.
I don't understand the sugar on the grits, but you were
I
putting
prefer like a
sugar
maple syrup, you know what I'm saying? More than just like
fancy.
sugar. Yeah.
I have to put
Just
like
grits.
cheese
Looking at
and
grits
hot
makes me think of prison food. It's like something I can imagine they feed you in a gulag or something.
You haven't had good grits then.
Yeah.
Nobody put a fried egg on top for you, Gene? Grits and eggs?
No grits and eggs, no shrimp and grits, no Old Bay covered. Turn the grits red with Old Bay.
I've had grits at
really
I've had
good.
grits at George's.
Oh, George's.
We're gonna have to get you some good grits, Djene.
I got food poisoning at George's, so
Me too. Well, I got diarrhea, but it's.
Why do you go to this place?
Man,
Don't eat that
this
grass.
is what happens when you invite a Hoot and Holler on a podcast. It immediately goes to diarrhea talk.
but
my favorite restaurant. Everybody knows my favorite restaurant in Springfield is the Golden Corral. That's like the main place for me.
Golden Corral will make you shit a 2x4.
What is all this talk about defecation, man?
That's what happens when you go to the all-you-can-eat buffets in Springfield. They've got what's the other one? The Mikados on Campbell. The one where they have all-you-can-eat sushi, which
we got a number
definitely
of
go ahead.
Can eat Americanized Chinese restaurants too. That's kind of like the staple. I think we have more Chinese buffets per person than any other town in the United States.
Citation needed.
Pat and Harvey, as a touring musician, the all-you-can-eat Americanized Chinese buffet definitely kept me alive throughout regions like yours. So
they do have some bad ones, though. They have Asian King Buffet, which I went to one time and never again.
Does every Asian person in there look extremely angry? Like they're working off a life debt?
Honestly, I can't really tell.
I think you just did a racism.
Is that a racism? I'm just saying they all look very busy when they're in there. I don't know what other all-you-can-eat buffets do they have in Springfield?
Ryan's? Is Ryan still around?
Well, no, but the Chinese ones, there's that one that's by McGuay.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Ichiban Buffet?
Ichiban, yeah. There used to be like 9 or 10. I mean, most of them, if you go in at lunch, they've got a buffet spread, but there used to be like a bunch of the big...
Jim Davis says there's a Jamaican place that sells meat pies now in Springfield.
Where is that, Jim?
That's fucking culture right there. But
Jim,
seriously, I want to ask this question seriously to you guys. If the school got shut down for 2 weeks, is that a positive motion?
Well, it's reactive, not proactive. What happened is last Friday, they logged, oh my God, it was 20+% of staff and just shy of 20% of students with positive cases. And the Attorney General sent a cease and desist letter to a bunch of school boards in December telling them that if they didn't get rid of their mask mandates, they were going to sue. So SPS got rid of their mask mandate. They were planning on it anyways. They used that letter as a convenient excuse to not have to take any shit over it, I guess. But so they held a basketball tournament with like 30,000 total attendance over 3 days and 11,000 peak attendance. Bronny James was there. Big deal. Like 1 in 600 people in there maybe wearing a mask, according to a source I talked to.
And I mean, it was kind of advertised like, you got to come to this. You might see LeBron.
Yeah. They broke the record attendance for
his son is really good. I can't front. His son is actually very good.
I mean, it's like a legit high school basketball tournament for sure. It's probably the premier prep school tournament in the country. It's the most attended one for sure. So they had Sierra Canyon. They had people from St. Paul the Sixth. They had a bunch of really top quality teams. I'm sure it would have been great. It would have been a lot of fun basketball to go, but they're packed shoulder to shoulder, nobody wearing masks for 3 days straight. Then the next week they had 20% cases throughout the school district, and now they're closed. And now they're going to virtual next week, but they were just straight up closed this week.
Really?
Wow.
So there was so because of this, like you said, it was reactive instead of proactive. There was no pushback from the parents. There was no guns at the school board meeting.
Well, Harvey's our school board expert. We haven't seen anything that explicit.
No. They would they read a disclaimer at the top that you can't threaten them. This story kind of got buried, but was it last Monday? And it didn't have anything to do with the masks, but a former employee called up to the school and said that he was going to come up there with guns. So he ended up getting arrested. That was last Monday.
And he called from his house phone?
I guess so.
And the whenever Eric Schmidt, the AG, the Missouri Attorney General, sent that letter, there were a number of protests of parents outside of the school. I mean, it was like 4 days left in the semester or something like that. They were protesting over the mask for 4 days. So they had a school board meeting Tuesday, though, and they passed on the opportunity to pass a mask mandate, and they've instead called a special meeting for the 28th. But Eric Schmidt filed 36 lawsuits against districts yesterday. So
for mask.
For mask.
It's in Springfield. It's like hot. It's like a political war in the sense that Springfield is more liberal than people think, because it's the medical hub. It has like the university, and it has a bunch of kind of like business infrastructure where you have kind of professionals who are generally liberally orientated. And, like my neighborhood is full of people with those signs that say this house believes in science, like that. But, full of those people, full of those kind of people. You have those people, and then you have like the reactionary provincial petty bourgeoisie, who are like the people who own like pool cleaning companies, but dress up in camo all day. And there's a kind of war between those two factions in Springfield. But the kind of bureaucratic elite of Springfield, which is either kind of on the download centrist Democrats or just like old school country club Republicans, they just don't want to provoke the state government into doing anything. So Missouri State University doesn't do anything until Mizzou puts its head out first.
I will say, Cliff Smart said there's a mask mandate at MSU this semester, at least starting out, and MU did not put in a mask mandate. So,
oh really? You didn't?
Yeah.
So I'm very surprised that they did that, because they've been extremely conservative about doing those kind of things, because it's a political nightmare for them, because all these institutions are already getting massive pushback. There's the whole CRT jihad taking place in Springfield. So like people are having their syllabi pulled up, and they have to, like hand that over to the state government. So, how's that stuff going, Harvey? Like, is that still a big thing at the school board, or is it all about masks now?
Well, so they just came back after the break. The first school board meeting was on the 18th after the break. And prior to the break, for months, it was, they allow up to 10 speakers, and 9 out of 10 speakers were either speaking about masks or about CRT. And at the latest meeting, there were only 4 speakers, and they were all in support of the school board, which was unusual. But I feel like the local cranks got a little bit distracted because they got what they wanted. The mask mandate got taken out. And so now that they're considering putting it back in, they're getting fired up about that. But our local cranks have been distracted by the flag issue lately. So.
What's the flag issue?
The city of Springfield just changed our official flag. The flag that we've been using since like the 30s is the red, white, blue bars of the state of Missouri with 4 stars at the corner, and it just says in black Springfield, Missouri in the middle of it. Okay. And now we've got, like 2015, there was that Roman Mars TED Talk or whatever about vexillology. And so
quality of place.
And and Springfield's got this big quality of place focus right now from the city and the council. And so they just passed a new flag that a lot of the reactionaries didn't like. They called it they called it gay and godless and all
satanic.
kinds of stuff. Satanic, yes. Masonic. Yeah. There was there was a clip that went viral last week, I think, that was just like all the various cranks standing up there and talking about Baphomet and Masonic symbols and swastikas and stuff like that.
And now they're starting a campaign to repeal the new flag. So they've been a little bit distracted, but I can tell with the new mask mandate for the school being considered, they're going to grab onto that again. So
it's kind of hard to build opposition movement whenever you just keep winning. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the problem for the conservatives in Springfield? Is that like they're so focused on like cultural issues, they're not actually bothered about that many things, that like anything substantial. So the kind of country club Republican centrist Democrats who run the city, they just cave in on all that stuff. And most of the time, it's not really serious, except now we have this mask mandate, which seems like an issue that can't be resolved.
I mean, I would describe our city council as being centrist, probably country club Republican. I mean, our guy, Mayor McClure, was chief of staff of Matt.
I'm Mayor McClure.
No, if only he was that cool. He's just like an old school Republican dude. I mean, they're all chamber of except for one of them. They're all chamber of commerce people, and so the reactionary right is like multiple instances of various reactionary right calling the chamber of commerce like socialists and commies and shit.
I mean, what this sounds like to me is that basically the culture wars are working effectively for the right in Springfield, which is not the most reactionary state in that region. Is that correct?
More or less, it's dragging the right. The culture war stuff is, I mean, you see that from local stuff up to the state stuff. Everybody is trying to run right of their opponents right now. Everybody calls everybody else a rhino. You have guys who were more or less members of the political establishment 5 years ago who are now rebranding themselves as like, outside firebrands. And Mike Parson, a guy who is largely ideologically indistinct from President Trump, is now a Republican in name only, and these guys are flanking him to the right, and it's really concerning to watch, honestly.
So speaking of culture war nonsense, and as Djene was talking about the CRT jihadists, which might be one of the funnier things I've ever heard in my life. It feels like the right is better at mobilizing themselves and infiltrating the levers of local power.
They have been, over the past year, I've watched them get better at organizing. But I mean, whenever you look at it, it's like the same group of people. It's the same small group of people that have been doing this for years now. But their numbers are growing a little bit, it seems. And they were able to mobilize over the summer for protests outside the hospital. They protested outside of our hospital every weekend, like all summer long.
The peak of Delta.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's they're huge into the school board and the city council. That is, they have made that their mission over the past year, to be at school board meetings, to be at city council meetings, always talking about something.
It really depends. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and hopefully this will be easy for you to add on to. Hasn't that been kind of the mission statement from a lot of their larger media figures, people like Steve Bannon?
Yeah, for sure.
Local levers of power, because it's so much easier. And it also feels like they're not looking for one simple leader. It feels like they are good at organizing, and they have, in my opinion, for decades now, infiltrated the working class.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, you see this especially, I mean, you see it all over the country, but you see it especially in places like here, where there is this conflation of like suburban petty bouge and then like, rural working class, to where these people who may be like blue collar, but are business owners, 2 dozen employees or whatever, pretending that they are the working class, and then driving home to their 5-bedroom McMansion. And
it's the redneck as a brand.
Yeah, I think of it as like the register mark, R redneck versus like, actual,
where you have lots of money identity to be able to buy the signifier.
Where you can afford to go to Bass Pro Store.
Well, is that branding? And I'm asking, I don't know the answer. Is that branding helping them gain political victories?
I think it's a part of it. I don't know that it necessarily is like a huge part of it, but I do think it is like it is kind of that like, oh, these people are like me kind of thing.
I think you're right that the culture wars are driving so much political organization here, and that is like a cultural signifier for them.
Yeah, it's something to kind of rally around, I guess. There's this kind of like real, I don't know, it's that real American thing that, I don't know how many cycles ago was that? Electoral cycles ago was the...
Does it cause, though, a cross-class coalition within the right, though? If you have these petty bourgeoisie business owners, also, are they working alongside, though, the lower true working class people?
I think you definitely see that to some degree. I mean,
a lot of the leaders on the right organizing that I watch are working class people.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of kind of like lumpenprole and petty bouge.
Mhm.
It depends on the issue, really. They tend to, if they find an issue that works and they are able to leverage whatever cultural thing they hone in on, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So
What about talk radio, local talk radio? I don't listen to local Springfield talk radio, but are those do those local talkers play a role in this organizing, would you say?
Nick Reed is the big one, and they're all friends with him. He boosts all of their stuff, and I try to listen to Nick Reed on my way to work in the morning, but it's all ads. It's just, it's just him reading copy for local businesses.
So there's a few, there's two main like talk radio stations, and they just go on for ever. But I don't know. They don't seem to, they hit the culture stuff, but none of them seem to really focus on like the local movement stuff. I've been trying to keep an eye on Nick Reed, like Harvey mentioned, he's kind of the most popular out of all of them. And he has like a weekly breakfast get together for his fans and stuff like that.
The Nick Reed Scrambler?
Yeah, the Nick Reed Scrambler breakfast.
See, guys, I'm telling you, the Denny's separate checks tour is where it's at. That's what we got to do. We got to fucking defeat the Nick Reeds of the world by going to Denny's.
But if he ever actually starts honing in on local politics, that might be a concerning development because, I think he could probably drive.
Well, I want to ask a question. One of the things I'd like to know is that how much of this politics is rooted in a kind of sense of reactionary racial politics or discourse as well? And is there a segment of this particular cohort that are real, true, hardcore kind of like white nationalists?
It's not explicit. Like out of the people that we're talking about that are kind of like at the center of all of that, I don't think I've ever caught any of them saying anything explicit. But it's
I think a large part of that is how like racially homogenized this area is, right?
Right. And that's something we talked about last time I was on, is that we're talking about a city that is like 94% white. You know what I mean? Like sometimes that racial tension doesn't flare to the surface simply because the homogeneity of the community. So most of their stuff is like warmed over Bircherism. So I don't know. I would explicitly call them white nationalists. I don't think I see that at the surface in this politic, in the local election stuff. We definitely have, there's a well-known Klan group just 60 miles from here. There's one of the, I don't know. We have plenty of that problem in the area. It's just not integral to the like pressures on the school board and city council stuff.
Would you say they're more motivated by radical Christianity rather than race?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And some pretty radical interpretations of Christianity.
But we are seeing the racism jump out with the CRT stuff for sure.
For sure.
What's
the best line you've heard so far?
Well, this guy that we've been covering since the very first episode of the podcast, Brian Seitz, he's the state rep from Branson. and he went viral just earlier this week. Like Rex Chapman tweeted about him or something, and a Grammy winner Richard Marx called him a fuck stick. Excuse my language.
Richard Marx from the 80s with the mullet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's got like he doesn't call it an anti-CRT bill in the House, but it's in that vein. It's about, you know, the lesson plans and stuff like that. And he's been crowing about CRT since before it took off. Like he was into this stuff from the minute he stepped into the Capitol his freshman year, like February or January last year. Before they were talking about it on Tucker every night and all that stuff, you know, like he was ahead of the curve on this. And he was in some committee meeting, and he said something about how he's not racist because he likes black-eyed peas and cornbread or some shit.
Just all white people like that shit in the South.
I know. I mean, he's from fucking Michigan. Like most of these guys are not from the Ozarks. I should point out, most of these people, like ourselves, are from somewhere else originally. So,
Springfield's kind of a hot place to move to, especially for retirees, because your money goes far.
Yeah, and the reactionary politics, the baseline reactionary politics, are a draw. You know,
I'm still fascinated at the fact that the guy that sang "Hold On to the Night" is a little shit poster. So I have to look up Richard Marx on Twitter or some shit like that. You want to go, Pascal?
So is this turning into actual organizing in terms of taking over the political infrastructure in these areas? Is this getting more people to run for candidates?
Yes.
Are elections actually getting people to win in local administrative offices? Are the machinery of politics being taken over by a whole new cadre of individuals who are buying into this politics?
So on our last election in April, where we had school board seats and council seats up, they tried and they ran kind of as a coalition, but they weren't explicit. They tried like a tactic of just kind of going down the middle. And the coalition, they did run as anti-maskers, but they didn't push it too hard.
They were trying to do like a populist thing without ever finding their message. And
they got one council seat and one school board seat. And like we were talking about, after that, they hit it hard that we need to be organizing around school board and city council. And that's, you know, top down, Steve Bannon on down is where they're getting this from. But they have 3 school board candidates that they're running for our school board election in April.
And the incumbent president is stepping down largely because of the fray of the last year or whatever.
And I mean, they are meeting weekly, twice weekly. They are meeting in person together for this organization. And they have one of their school board candidates has raised, how much was it? Like $13,000 or something?
Quite a bit of money for a school board race.
Where none of the other candidates have raised any money.
I mean, I think the typical spending on a school board race is like sub $1,000.
Yeah.
One of my colleagues at Missouri State was running for the school board, but I think he dropped out. He was
was it Kyler Sherman Wilkins?
Yeah, Kyler Sherman. Yeah, he dropped out because they needed to consolidate behind one liberal candidate.
Yeah, I think because Charles Taylor is running for re-election,
and is a war criminal in Liberia.
But he is maybe the most liberal on the school board, and he was the first to speak up in support of bringing back the mask mandate.
Yeah, so I mean that's still very much up in the air, Pascal's, like whether or not this will succeed.
Yeah, because I assume they realized their error was not being more explicit in their campaign last year. So I think they're running farther to the right this time, and we'll see how it works out for them.
But this
Is
the
there
thing,
any
though.
pushback? Is there any pushback on the mask since like people are sick? You know, like you would think perhaps the like results of this might change minds, or is it still locked in? I'm sorry,
There
Pascal.
were-
Oh, they're so mad.
I mean, there's, I mean, a lot of, yeah, they're not changing their mind. No, I mean, at this point here, like even getting the liberals to give a shit is getting kind of hard, to be honest, on the COVID front. But yeah, I don't know. What we saw whenever they did rescind the mask mandate is these people immediately pivoted back to the CRT thing. Like, it's not about the masks.
That was
It's
something
not even
super
about-
interesting to me because they cried about the masks for months. And then when it was repealed, crickets. There
Our
was
kids
nothing.
can't breathe. They're suffocating, and my teenage daughter's her acne is breaking out, and I had to buy medication for it, and it was very expensive, and I'd rather not do that again.
I mean, that's something that at the last school board meeting where they were debating whether or not to vote on bringing back masks, the candidate that they got in, who is the anti-mask school board member, she was going off about how masks make kids suicidal. They don't
Word.
work, all of that
That's
stuff.
what
Yeah.
it was. I thought it was Judas Priest. Silly me.
I mean, it's just the same moral panic over and over again with a new skin on it, you know?
But that's shitty. I mean, can you at least be legit like the 80s where, you know, these kids with horrible drug problems and alcohol issues and home problems are shooting themselves and you're just blaming it on Ozzy Osbourne? Now you're blaming it on literally the act of wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Well, because it's not about the masks. It's about defunding public schools.
Yeah. I mean, all of
That's
them
what it's
are,
about.
Say it again for the people in the back.
it's yeah. I mean, it all intersects, right? Like I think genuinely care about the mask thing because of whatever individualist, you know, ideology that they're completely subsumed by. I think that they are also genuinely knee-jerk reacting to, you know, the critical race theory stuff. Like, but also, yeah, the goal is they just don't believe in public education. These are all people who support vouchers. These are all people who would rather send their kids to parochial school and rather not pay for it. So,
Because there's
it's
no God
clear
in
that-
public schools.
Right. Yeah. Which, as someone who went to Branson High School, I would greatly push back against the idea that there's no God in public schools. But the amount of times
you
I
have
was
to say
subjected to
Pledge of
prayer and to guys riding motorcycles in the gymnasium to talk about Christ and stuff. Like,
Well, you know, it's interesting that we just kind of stumbled on this hardly because I'll be honest with you, I'm not seeing very many people make the connection between the anti-CRT school debate and discourse and public school defunding and school choice. That's not, you know, I mean, I don't know if you just kind of slipped there and said that, but this is like kind of ringing all kinds of bells for me because I'm like, how come no one else is talking about the correlation between these things?
Yeah, no, that's what 100% what it's about. It's about funneling money from public schools into their private charter schools. And there's also bringing it back to the radical Christianity. There's a huge, huge homeschooling movement. And Josh Hawley wants to pay parents to homeschool their kids. He wants to spend that money to pay parents for homeschooling, for biblical homeschooling, of course.
yeah.
Yeah, super chat here.
Oh, you got
I
it, Pascal?
would
Okay.
like to address. Can someone
Can
explain
you
what
see it
the
on the
right,
screen?
yeah? Can someone explain what the right materially delivers to their working class base in the U.S.? They just cut child tax credits, still get their votes.
Would you say it's the illusion of action that the right delivers?
100%. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not providing anything material necessarily, but they are providing a sense of righteousness, a sense of punishing one's enemies. You know, like there's lots of other things that you can activate in people in order to get them to act politically that aren't just their material interests, unfortunately, because certainly we would like the local working class to think about their relationship to capital first, but instead, like, you know, they're getting activated over racial grievance. They're getting activated over, you know, punishing Dems. I mean, they've heard this, you know, the lib stuff for years and years and years now, and they're tired of them. They're ready to punish all the libs. So it's people offering to. It's one of the things that you're seeing play out right now, like at the state level, is they're doing redistricting. So the establishment is trying to is passed a map that's like 6-2, right? 6 Republican seats, 2 Republican seats, saving Emmanuel Cleaver's seat. Their idea is that if they draw Emmanuel Cleaver's seat out into a bunch of rural districts, you know, the growing Kansas City population will eventually flip multiple districts, you know, the demographics is destiny kind of thing or whatever. But the people who are trying to flank to the right, who want Cleaver drawn out, they want that immediate gratification of taking away a Democrat seat, of punishing Emmanuel Cleaver, of punishing Kansas City. I mean, if you hear even Springfield people, but especially rural people, rural conservatives in the state, they will gladly cut free St. Louis and Kansas City in a heartbeat.
I mean, those places, I haven't been to KC since 2016. About the same with St. Louis. It didn't look all that wonderful when I was there. If I remember correctly, it was kind of one of these cities that it was trying to have a bit of a resurgence with kind of trying to rebuild the downtown area, but there was a lot of abandoned buildings.
Yeah. I mean, Kansas City, I love both Kansas City and St. Louis, like, deeply, especially Kansas City, because I'm kind of I like a gritty town personally.
It is a gritty town.
I like old brick and gunshots, I guess. But I mean, both of those towns are towns with troubled racist pasts, you know, like, and St. Louis is even explicitly more along a like the racial capitalism line, because like the reaction against a multiracial strike in the late 1870s, the railroad strike, led to white backlash from the bourgeois class that closed down the city, basically. I mean, that was kind of, St. Louis was on its, you know, track to be the next Paris, the Paris of the Midwest or whatever, and then it's essentially been in decline since the 1880s because of racist people with capital making sure that the people below them stay in their place or whatever.
But they still have the Negro baseball.
That's in Kansas City, 18 to Fine. And if you've never been, I suggest, I can highly recommend that museum. It rules. It's very cool.
I mean, there's definitely things I love besides food. Fucking some of the best barbecue in the nation is in KC. I said it.
So shout out to LC's barbecue.
They have one other thing that Pascal usually talks about, and I kind of want to ask you about as well. Is, you know, we talked a little bit about the way that, you know, the right wing, what, you know, there's Christianity as an axis of culture war politics mobilized by the right. There's racial grievance, or at least the simmering racial grievance, which is perhaps in Springfield is perhaps less important than the religious aspect, I think, because they're always bringing a black guy to come and tell everybody about, like, Jesus as well.
Yeah, Calvin Morrow has been behind a lot of this, a local black pastor, local evangelical Pentecostal black pastor who's been against, helped turn over the sexual orientation and gender identity protections in 2015, has been behind a lot of the CRT stuff.
And Back on Track America, which is a local group.
What about gender what about gender politics and this issue? I mean, Josh Hawley is a big one for the boys need to be boys, and girls need to be girls kind of thing. What is your sense of the underlying sort of crisis in masculinity politics and how that plays into this reactionary mobilization in Springfield and more broadly in the Midwest?
You want to take the misogyny part, and I'll take the homophobe part.
Are you saying Josh Hawley's not a fan of bronies?
Josh Hawley, I've heard some rumors about things that Josh Hawley gets up to behind the scenes, but they're just rumors.
Oh.
He's got very clean hands, very soft hands. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like with this flag thing, there's an undercurrent of it's a gay flag. I'm not totally
what's gay
sure
about it?
Well, I don't really. Well, it's light blue, so they think it's like weak. So they were never really explicit about this stuff. Let me be clear. Nobody ever. I mean, there were a couple people on Facebook or whatever who said it was gay or whatever, but the people who were speaking at council always just kind of danced around this. But one of the women said it as close to on the surface as possible and said, it seems like some people are trying to change the meaning of Queen in Queen City. Take that as you will. And these are, again, like these are people who are all involved in. We had the city council pass an ordinance in 2015 adding sexual orientation and gender identity to like the non-discrimination policy, and then there was a huge, I think, multi-million-dollar recall campaign led by Calvin Morrow and his group Kuba, Christians United for Political Action, and James River Assembly, a mega church in just the town south of here. And so a lot of the people that are acting now all got kind of activated in that. Like homophobia is a big part of this.
And you can see, like you were talking about Josh Hawley's manhood campaign or whatever. James River, the mega church, they started a men's conference where, and it's an annual men's conference now, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Where they like get greased up and throw heavy objects around.
Wait, time out.
To prove that they're men.
The flag is gay, but oiling up a dude.
That's not gay if you don't kiss. That's the rules. I mean, like, well, let's just hold on a second. We did in Springfield have a contestant for the RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah, Crystal Method. I actually did a few songs and get dusted over the years. I think I did a couple of different performances where I was dusted by Crystal Method.
What does that mean? Sorry, Pascal. Go ahead.
I had a question I want to ask. That we're talking about a state, Missouri, that's never been a blue state. It's at best purple. So most of the political mechanisms and seats in electoral officials would have been Republicans anyway. So is this a move to purge an already conservative political establishment of what they would call rhinos and move it to the right? Because it doesn't seem like there's a left in this state to be fighting.
Well, I do want to. This was a blue state. We had a blue trifecta as recently as the early 90s, I think. And we had a friggin' Democrat as governor, Jay Nixon. What? He was our last
until 2016.
Until 2016. So I mean, it's not been a ruby red state for long, and it was forever a very purple state. But there have definitely been parts where the Democrats were in control. But it's more of a conservative. Even in the 90s, more conservative than even Clinton's Democratic Party. You know what I mean? So I mean.
But to answer the question, yeah,
yes, they are dragging the Overton window way to the right.
They're rhino hunting.
Yeah, it's rhino. This year is 100% rhino season. The rhinos going extinct.
Pascal, it seems that in the chat people are upset, or there's a person upset with our talk about race because we should talk
one
about
question.
Race.
That was one. We had one question about that.
But someone's upset, and they said that we're right wingers now.
We're right wingers because we talk about race.
Yeah.
How does that
Pascal, you know you're not allowed to talk about race. Otherwise, you're in the
because
DMV.
I guess we're black people that don't say blackity black 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 all the time, so they probably feel comfortable coming here, but they think that we don't believe racism is real or some silly shit like that. You want to address that real quick?
I guess, and they certainly what they think that because we're left, we don't talk about race, so we don't talk about the fact that there is a material reality to the way in which race is used in American capitalism. We talk about that on this show all the time.
Yeah, I know that. I usually put the shows together. Yeah, I know.
It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, since when has the left not?
He said no. I said you're here. I'll put it on. Say you're shifting right. I didn't call you right wingers. What does that mean? You're an idiot.
In this particular political context, wouldn't talking about race mean we're shifting liberal? How would that make us shifting right or shifting left?
Because they base their politics on what podcast they watch.
As a podcaster, I would absolutely, I would suggest you don't do that.
Well, you know, I think we need to accept that the new ideology of the American left is cyber-Leninism, where instead of the vanguard party, you have the podcasters will be the vanguard of the proletariat, leading us to revolution, one vlog at a time.
This person is a fucking moron. They said that we talk about class in Minneapolis, but race Ozarks. It's literally not true. Literally not true.
I don't think this individual is someone who watches our show regularly and doesn't really understand what we're about.
And I feel like we were having a conversation about class in the Ozarks.
Of course. But, you know.
Yeah. I mean, again, the thing that's activating these people is not necessarily material. Like it's hatched, obviously. Capital winds all through all of this. I'm just saying, I think that this area has a problem with race. Absolutely. Of course. I'm just saying it's not sitting boiling at the surface because of the homogeneity. And I'm saying that these people are not activated by their material, that they're not thinking of their material conditions first. They're thinking of other things first.
And I would also say, like, there are elements on the left who don't understand this. I was in a meeting with a group of lefties, kind of like contrarian lefties, who were talking about the Trump supporters and the Trump working class and all this kind of stuff. And they're all people who live in New York City. I'm like, my friends, you don't live in these regions. A lot of people can't tell the difference between this petty bourgeois cadre that dominates political life in provincial United States and the actual working class. American politics, in my opinion, and I would like to get everybody's opinion on this, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are two class coalitions. At the head of the Democratic Party class coalition, you have elements of the large bourgeoisie, the national bourgeoisie and corporate elite, state cadres, the professional managerial sense in the very elite sense of that word, the people who literally run the state, elements of the security apparatus, and those kind of things. And the Republican Party is made up of the provincial bourgeoisie, rogue, almost criminal-like elements of the big bourgeoisie, renegades, junior officer type people, and other kinds of sort of rogue, a minority of professionals. So these two political parties are dominated by different factions of the bourgeoisie, and they've split up the support of the working class. And that means in the Black community, they mobilized via the Black political class. And in rural United States, you have a similar phenomena, except you have a kind of like petty bourgeois, camo-wearing political class that governs through the churches, not too dissimilar from what you would see in an urban area. So I think we have to when we look at the political parties in this country, we need to understand that they are two bourgeois political parties representing different factions of the bourgeoisie, and that subordinate the issues of the working class to their broader political agendas. I mean, I don't know if people would see it that way, but that tends to be how I see it.
Well, I think there's no question that both parties are flanks of the bourgeoisie, But I would categorize it that the liberals or the left flank of capital is more attached to finance capital, the NGO world, the university administrations, and pharmaceutical companies and things of that nature, where the right is more attached to oil, energy, natural gas, and manufacturing. So it's a different type of capital that is motivated by the right, as opposed to the left flank of capital, the liberal flank of capital. But the thing is, though, I do agree that both of them are interested in avoiding implementing materialist politics. But because the Democratic Party is the coalition of all that are not basically rooted in a racial reactionary nature, and because they have had the facade of being a party based on material interests of the working class, it's more important for them to act as a buffer against white reaction by using racial diversity discourse to mask their lack of desire for material policy. The right does the same way, but because they are the party of racial reaction, they use culture as a means to obfuscate from the fact that they're not interested in material policy.
What would your takes be, Pat and Harvey, when you think about the class politics of American political parties?
I mean, I largely agree with both of you. What I see from here, from flyover country, is even on the local level, no one who represents me, not, obviously white guy, whatever, but I mean, nobody who represents my class interests, even at the local level. I definitely don't see it at the state and certainly not the national level in either party, despite the rhetoric from both parties. As far as being largely an outsider to politics, as far as like elections and stuff, like, yeah, I guess I just don't, I don't want to look at it because I hate them both.
And I mean, at the city level, our class interests aren't represented because we have a chamber of commerce. We have two chambers. We have the chamber, and then we have the chamber that sits on the council, and they represent the petty bourge class interests of the city. And
just outright capital itself. They have that reactionary petty bourge voice in Angela Romine. The rest of them, though, more represent like larger corps and stuff like that. They're more on the professional managerial side than they are on the
it's funny side. That the only non-chamber seat on council is the far right.
Yeah.
Well,
that's crazy.
What's disturbing about this, right, is that we've had this iteration of a kind of quote unquote, we want to call them progressives, left, socialists, come about since 2016 that have captured some small parts of the election mechanisms in certain localities. For example, people say Nevada, we have a few quote unquote DSA members splattered in Congress seats in local municipalities, but that supposed capture of 30 some odd % of the Democratic Party, or 34% that Sanders had in 2016, it never translated into mobilizing into expansion. And as a matter of fact, I never saw any energy to make that happen at all, except simply focusing on electoralism. How badly did this faction drop the ball in these spaces?
I think I don't know how much of it is dropping the ball and how much of it is just like a top-down strategy doesn't build lasting coalitions and it doesn't build lasting movements. You know what I'm saying? Like someone like Bernie Sanders comes along every once in a while and can motivate a large swath of people to actually become politically activated or whatever. But I just don't see how you get something durable out of that. Even if they had operated on 100%, hadn't dropped the ball, whatever, how are you going to build a durable coalition out of something that is largely backing a person, as much his personality as his politics, and he's kind of a moderating force for the left anyways. Like, as many people have pointed out, this guy would be just like among the liberals in most parliamentarian systems. He's not like a leftist. He's a social democrat who calls himself a socialist, which is fine. I love Bernie. But we saw a big drop from 2016 to 2020 in the organizing in the primaries, even though
Springfield was on fire for Bernie in 2016. And then where are all those people now?
People in the back and the front. What?
Yeah. Oh, he filled out the filled out the arena.
Filled out the arena. So the line was so long that it filled the arena, and there was still a few hundred people who couldn't get in. So Bernie gave his speech inside the arena, then went outside and gave the same speech again to all the people standing outside who weren't able to get into the arena because it was full.
But I have a story about that, Pascal, too. So when that happened, that was 2016. I was still working in Iraq, and I came to Springfield for my interview at Missouri State, and I was staying at this house on I forget I was staying at this like bed and breakfast just next to the university, opposite the university hotel, and I came out of my room kind of jet lagged, had a look around, and there was a queue, and I was like, "What is this queue all about?" So I joined the queue, as you do. You know, you go check it out and talk to people. And I got to go to a Bernie Sanders rally, and I got a badge for everybody back in Iraq. So yeah, I attended that that Sanders rally by accident.
But then you see in 2020 that was gone. It was there wasn't nearly the energy around it. And, you know, in 2020, he did arguably, at least early, much better than he did against Clinton in 2016. But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I'm sorry, Pat. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to ask this question to the panel. Would you, and I'm asking this question to everybody listening in the chat as well. Would you say that a lot of that change you saw was because there is such a young, burgeoning left that doesn't know how to deal with any sort of defeat?
I think that's part of it, but I really think part of it is that you build a top-down infrastructure, try to turn that into a movement, and then 4 years goes largely dormant. When you try to spin that back up, you're going to miss a lot of the places down chain that you had 4 years ago. Whereas if we're building our movements locally, if we're doing the work in between those 4 years, if we're focusing on, I can't do shit about a president. I can't even do anything about Attorney General Eric Schmidt other than vote for him in the Republican primary and hope that he goes to the Senate and gets the hell out of Missouri. That's about the only thing I can do about him. But I can go to city council. I can literally talk to a city councilor, member if I want to. I can talk to a school board member if I want to. I can put that. These people are the opposition. The enemy is putting their focus on the local stuff where they can actually put road to rubber. And I feel that that's where we build these we build these durable coalitions. And we're really, the folks that we work with, we're intertenancy, we're a broad coalition, and we're trying to build something. I don't know.
Do you think, and to add on to that, do you think that sadly a lot of what we do is too based in federal politics? Because a lot of us exist on this. Be honest, a lot of us exist on the internet.
I think that's a big part of it.
And I mean, that's what, since I've been noticing over the last year, what the right is doing in their organizing around council and school board, because it's an old tactic. This is what they did starting in the 50s, based in defeating communism. And that's how the right grew power. That's how, they latched on to the abortion thing. Well, it started prayer in school. Then it was abortion.
Anything to talk about segregation without saying segregation.
And they're just repeating those organizing tactics that they've been perfecting for 60 years. But I've been saying we need to match their organizing. If this is where they're organizing, then that's where we need to be organizing.
Do you think that we were talking about this definitely off air, and I was also having a conversation with Teray about right-wing Republicans, about an article that he's thinking about writing about how people love to say that, a lot of this shift happened during Reagan. And he's like, I mean, McCarthy was pretty horrible.
Yeah.
And Pascal, You talked about this with the New Deal as well, that you feel the New Deal was kind of a moment where the left never really recovered. And by the time we get to the 60s, a lot of the left is entrenched in academia. And definitely the working class has been surrendered and taken over by the right. So,
I mean, I wish I could be brilliant enough to take claim for an analysis, but as Djene will probably concede with me, is that that's basically the premise of the Frankfurt School. Am I not correct, G?
I mean, I would. I mean, you know as well as I do, that was one of the critiques of the New Left in general, that the working class was no longer going to be the revolutionary subject. They'd been pacified by the New Deal to such an extent that these people started looking for new potential revolutionary subjects in marginalized groups and students, which that's probably a vast oversimplification, but I think that was a huge part of the kind of shift in left-wing politics away from the more traditional mode of
working class organizing.
Working class organizing. And isn't that the same in the Black community in general? You go from a movement in the 30s and 40s, which is dominated by Black socialists and communists, towards a liberal dominated movement that is at least taking its cues from the left in terms of its rhetoric, and eventually in the 70s and 80s translating into this full-on neoliberal Black political class.
Well, I would make the argument that the fact that was the case with the Black politics is that similar to the white left, you did have a working class based organizing in the 30s going into the 40s, coming out of Black socialists, communists, and leftists. But what happens is that Cold War anti-communism and McCarthyism strips that capacity, as Touré explains very effectively in this piece in Dissent, and forces a doubling down on racial democracy, stripping away the materialist class element of Black politics even earlier than the iteration of the Black political class than we get after the Civil Rights Movement, which is a really good argument that Touré has made in this piece, right? That I think that, maybe we haven't investigated enough in our analysis of Black politics and the Black political class and its development, is that the move to racial democracy, or the reductionism, or if you want to say race first, really starts because of McCarthyism, and is doubled down in the post-civil rights era of 50-year plus counter-revolution. But because we become even more separated from materialist politics in the 70s and the 80s due to the change in capitalism, and we're basically having Black people integrate into neoliberalism, right? Someone keeps asking me, well, wasn't integration a failure? I said Black people didn't integrate into American economy. They integrated into neoliberalism. And that was a part of the problem as to why there was no capacity to get integrating into a full functioning economic paradigm. So to your point, Djene, I think you're not incorrect in your analysis, but I think the factor that kind of causes that demobilization in terms of Black politics, and that's something I don't think is talked about enough, is the way in which Cold War anti-communism causes this shift, stripping Black politics of its materiality. And I think if you read my piece that I had in Black Agenda, the last piece I wrote in the Black Agenda report, Are Black Folk the Crash Test Dummies for Democrats? I talk about that a little bit in that piece.
To return to the question of local politics, I think that's and I want to ask you specifically about what's going on in Springfield and how you guys are organizing. But I think, and this speaks to something that Jason talks about a lot, is, the online left is very useful to a certain degree. Like we can complain about it all the time, but on the other hand, it has to a certain degree, at least for a growing group of people in the United States, even though it's a small minority, provided a mechanism through which the idea that maybe capitalism isn't the best system can be normalized to people, and it's not seen as like something beyond the intellectual pale. It has made people who are perhaps in small towns or in places where there isn't a large left-wing political movement feel that they're not the only people out there. So there are certain and it's created a venue where people can very easily get political education or learn about things, depending on how the quality of the show. But there are opportunities where you can find things out, learn things, or at very least get an idea of what kind of left-wing literature you might be interested in reading. So, you have these opportunities, but I think another contradiction of it is that it creates a national and even kind of international, because it draws in people from outside of the United States, a kind of discourse that focuses around national federal politics.
Yes.
That focuses around issues, for example, like, okay, the Bernie campaign was an important mobilizing tool. But then, after the Bernie campaign, which was a national campaign, but at least had the potentiality to create an organizing base, you've had echoes of that which have lacked any potential for organizing. So you've had these Medicare campaigns which don't seem to have any, which are entirely online. You have something like Force the Vote, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, is ultimately a kind of online political movement without a clear organizing principles. And when I say cyber Leninism, you have podcast hosts posturing as political leaders. And one thing I think we make clear on this show is that the last thing you need to be doing is taking your political cues from us, because we're not affiliated, we're not leaders or elected within any political movement. So the problem with this national sphere is people look to this new cadre of online entertainers to find leadership and focus their political energy towards a national politics, which they actually have very little ability to affect. Even with the huge mobilization behind Bernie Sanders, he freaking got crushed once the political elite. However, I think at the local level, and we see this in a place like Cooperation Jackson, we see this in the steps being made by Suwama Kashan in Seattle, or some of the
area.
Some of the DSAs. It's like it's not perfect. It's not it's not winning, but that seems to be a far more effective vehicle through which to engage in politics and perhaps get small short-term gains for people who can so they can actually see that these people are not bullshitting and they will actually bring something. Because I think something you told me, Jason, is when Bernie Sanders is making all these like big pledges, Black people are like, well, is he really going to do it? Or they just don't believe that this is a kind of program that can be done. So to turn to our guests, how do we do this stuff on a local level? Because you guys are engaged locally. What is the role of electoral politics? And what is the role of other things such as mutual aid? And what is mutual aid and how can it help in organizing?
What does mutual aid look like for you guys? Because that's a word or term that I hear thrown around a lot as a proxy. But what does mutual aid really look like?
Yeah, so like we, after Biden got elected, we said fuck all this and decided to turn to the local level, and we started with mutual aid. And for us, what it looked like was so we are members of the SRA, the Socialist Rifle Association, and there are other leftist orgs in Springfield. There's a DSA chapter, there's a PSL chapter, and there's Food Not Bombs, anarchists. And we all, members of those four groups, got together, and because we all wanted to do mutual aid. And so we formed a coalition to just start doing it, to just start helping people, because that's the only thing that's going to pull us forward. It's been demonstrated over and over again that, what they're doing at a national level, even at a state level sometimes, is theater. They're just doing kayfabe, and it doesn't matter. They're not going to ever help us because that's not in their interest. So we have to help each other. And mutual aid is a mutually beneficial system of taking care of people.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, you may dig this, like the thing that really, I think the thing that we leverage to get to this point where we have multi-tendency, coalition of MLs, democratic socialists, anarchists, and then, SRA is a very big tent, but we kind of leveraged the local music scene almost all of the original people that we got a hold of in each of the orgs were just people we knew from basement shows and from the punk scene. And that's just we're kind of in a way building it out of that.
And I mean, we've been one of our organizers said this, and I just love it. Now I say it all the time, is that we've been building the ship as we sail it. We've just been figuring it out as we go along, because what our mutual aid group, Southwest Missouri Solidarity Network, started as someone said, hey, there's people, they are asking for blankets. They're cold. And they asked if I knew where I could get any blankets. So we said, let's start there. And we organized a blanket drive, and it grew from that. And from there, we've never missed a Monday in 15 months now.
Mm-hmm.
We've never missed a Monday distributing goods to our unhoused population here.
Yeah, we've done a number of break light clinics.
That's the good thing I appreciate about punk and hardcore music. I don't know if you saw, I did a video essay recently on punk and the cultures of deconstruction and authenticity that kind of run through that genre to neutralize anything good that it did.
I read your I was a teenage anarchist.
It's based on that. Basically, I condensed it to 1,000 words to do a video essay, and part 2 was going to really probably piss people off, but
and not just, and we've also used, I think another reason we've been successful is using the art community for fundraising, because one of the most success, we have shows, we've done raffles of people's art, but our most successful fundraiser is we did a Twitch telethon last March, where it was like 9 or 10 hours long.
Yeah, had a bunch of bands submit stuff, and our friends Kevin and Matt, who I think are tuned in right now, are absolute maniacs and managed to keep everybody entertained and throwing dollars at it for like 10 hours straight or whatever.
And it was just fun, and we raised almost $5,000 that night.
Wow.
And I mean, mutual aid, this is a band-aid on a bullet wound, right? Like, we'll never, through this explicitly, we'll never solve the problems of capitalism, even on a micro scale locally. But what we can do is build movements, is build trust, is build commonality and communion between disparate groups of people, finding the common ground, finding.
I want to interject here, because you guys really kind of tipped me into an interesting idea with that particular point. I understand the mutual aid necessity when the state is not providing services to the masses. Maybe comrades should do some type of services to indulge in encouraging that kind of cooperation. Not only doing mutual aid, but what about mutual fellowship, mutual socializing, mutual organizing around events that are not necessarily not fun? We've talked about this before: barbecues, picnics, beach parties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we try to party together as much as we can. I mean, finding the joy outside of the work. Finding the joy,
not just with each other, but like with other people.
For sure.
Well, and that's what our Monday distributions have turned into, that, because these people that we met to serve, they've become our friends, like our true friends, and we look forward to seeing them on Mondays. And it's, the actual distribution part of distro takes about 5 minutes to pass out all the stuff, but then our organizers are out there for 2 or 3 hours just talking,
sharing a meal, sharing conversations, sussing out the problems in the community.
I fleshed that out, Jason.
When I talk about infiltrating, every space of the right, and trying to launch this sports show as well, we have a gaming show on this channel as well. It really gets into why can't we be the Little League coaches and the Pop Warner football coaches and really try to infiltrate all these spaces? Why are we afraid to go into churches? This has been not so much with you, Pat and Harvey, but we've had other people on this show where we're like, well, why don't you try to go into black churches? And it's been so much of a point that it's a joke in the chat now. Like, oh, are these white guys okay to go into the black churches? Like, why are people afraid to take over these spaces that have definitely been taken over by right-wing ideology. I truly believe even little, club soccer, because I lived with a family that is white that had far right, not far right, but kind of more right-wing beliefs, and a lot of soccer had all this ideology in it. So even from like a young child, you're getting indoctrinated into thinking this ideology is the way.
For sure. And
there is no counter.
And it's we were an organizing tactic we were thinking about trying out, but then coronavirus got in the way, winter came on, and so it just kind of got pushed to the side. But we were talking about having block parties, like at least once a month, bringing the block party back.
For the people in the
Yes.
back.
Going to every neighborhood and having block parties.
Music, food, hang out, of course, do some political education where you can, try to find some new comrades and stuff, but make the community aspect the primary part of it, because
Mutual fellowship. What do you guys like about what you think? That's a good name. Does it sound too
I like mutual fellowship.
Yeah,
I'm into doing
and
mutual
especially
fellowship.
because fellowship is a big buzzword in our
Churches,
evangelical community
and
here. And so taking back the power of that word, I think.
And I mean, people are so alienated in American society anyways, but especially in the Ozarks, like the compact with the state is nearly non-existent now, right? And so like this one communal force that is really left is the church. And personally, I won't be finding myself organizing in any churches soon. I have a lot of Christian comrades, but I'm not personally one. But I do think that is absolutely either in a dual power inside outside kind of thing. Not only starting to be in those churches, but also, I mean, part of the thing with us doing distribution to the unhoused is because there's nobody not affiliated with a church doing it.
That's something we hear all the time from those people that we serve is, I'm so glad that you aren't a church. This is the only place I can go that's not a church. And I love to hear that. But I mean, something that we've talked about a lot on our show is that Christians who go to church, they have this community. They have, when someone dies, they have somebody who'll bring a lasagna to their house. You know, when someone's sick in the house, they have somebody who can bring the chicken soup over. They have somebody who can watch their kids for free. That's all mutual aid. And a lot of people, a lot of millennials, a lot of people on the left, there's not a whole lot of churchgoers. And so we're missing that aspect of community.
Pascal, I know you want to say something.
I'm getting my own kind of high on that mutual fellowship.
Well, a lot of times we get asked this question, and I don't know if you guys get hit with it, and your show is a little different because you are so entrenched locally in your politics, which I am an extreme fan of, right? But people say, well, what do we do? What do we do? Tell us what to do. And I think this conversation is kind of, this is what you do.
Yeah, I'd say join an org first if you ask me what to do, because you need to be making, if you want to be actually do leftist politics, you can't do leftist politics alone unless you're some like Ann Prim or something. Even then, you're gonna want yourself a little village to survive. So,
but I would say
don't do it alone.
You don't have to join an org. You can create an org. You can get 3 friends together and say you're going to hand out some blankets, and then there you've created an org.
Absolutely.
But I mean, something that we have found, like what I love the most about what we found, this started out because we wanted to help, because we wanted to serve the people. But what we've created is power in our own group. And it's something where, like, even within our own group, I know if my car breaks down, I can call any one of my comrades. The other day I went and jumped one of my comrades' car because he put it in the chat. So we have that amongst ourselves, but it's also something where we have the foundation now. We have the infrastructure that we're starting to build that can go into other things. Because now if we get hit with a natural disaster, that infrastructure is already in place for us to mobilize and jump into action. And we saw that when Hurricane Ida hit, we wanted to help out our comrades to the south. And so we found a grassroots supply chain that popped up. And because of the infrastructure that we had in place here, in 3 days, we were able to get 2 carloads of supplies.
I'm very good at fitting things into places. She calls me the perfect pack guy. I had 2 cars completely stuffed out. We took down a bunch of stuff, and we were able to hand it off, and they handed it off, and it got to where it needed to go.
Yeah, we took it to a drop point. They grabbed it and took it to another drop point. It was a supply chain like that just organically, appeared. And it was because we had that infrastructure that we were able, from genesis of the idea of, hey, let's help, to boots on the ground. Us arriving in Louisiana was 3 days. And that's a turnaround that wouldn't have been able to happen if we hadn't had our infrastructure in place.
And I don't want to be Pollyanna. Like I think the local situation, and especially at the state level situation, is pretty bleak. I'm not gonna lie. I generally,
I don't think anyone's ever accused us of being Pollyanna.
Yeah. I generally think that the situation will continue to decline on that front, and the federal system, who knows, but as the empire crumbles, so will the tenuous connections between us all at the federal level. But what we're, in the event that things get worse and worse and worse, we're not going to be starting from scratch, looking around, wondering who we can trust, who we can go to. We are here. We're working with folks. We're meeting new folks every day. We're bringing folks into the coalition, to the network, and it's allowing us to think of the less terrifying future. Even if for those of us less inclined to have revolutionary optimism, like myself, can think of a future in which this area is still livable, in which it's still survivable as someone, as a bi person, or as a leftist in the Ozarks. Like,
I want to address a question our good friend Shirley, fan of the show, said, where is the evidence that organizing with the white working class is possible? I got a simple question for that. You don't have family members that work in unions with white people? My mom was a member of 1199 in New York City. One of her closest friends was a white former fireman who was a nurse. Black folk organize with the white working class all the time in their own unions. So if you can do it in your own union, where you're a laborer, whether you're a member of the teachers union, whether it's the SEIU, whether it's a construction union, and you're basically arguing out your political interests with people who are not of your ethnic or racial makeup, why can't we translate that into normative politics?
I feel like, people are kind of siloed, and they don't really. Not too many people are going to live in a situation like I live, where I don't have an infrastructure here of friends and family. And the other day, I've come to know a gentleman that owns a burger place because he's a metal guy. And I sold him an amp because I can't really play loud here, right? And he's so entrenched in the community that when people walk up to his burger stand, he can look at him and be like, "Oh, you're getting the blah 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 with the side of fries and the dipping sauce." And this older white guy came up, and first thing he does is he goes, "Hey, this is Jason. He's new here." And this white guy goes, "Oh, you're new here. I've been here for about 4 years. Do you have a network?" And I was like, I don't think so. And he's telling me about how recently his wife got very ill from eating some fish. And because of his network, he was able to call a doctor to come to his house, fix his wife up, and come back and check on her the next day. He's like, and it cost me like $150.
It's important to have community.
It is extremely important to have community, and we can't get disconnected from that because maybe someone has some slightly different political opinions. Again, I can't stress it enough. There's a difference between people that are politically, activated. Maybe you're not going to be friends with Proud Boy neighbor, or your 3% neighbor, or your Klan member neighbor. That's very, very different than someone that may have similar class politics than you, that maybe you think that they're a little too Archie Bunkerish.
Right. And how do you, the class politic is a especially with those people, is a great way to break down those silos. And when those silos break down, when those walls break down, that racial grievance tends to follow with it. You see in areas that are much more desegregated, you tend to see a lot more harmony, a lot more people working together, versus areas where there are like demarcation lines, like in some place like Kansas City, where something like 70-80% of the Black population lives east of Troost.
And I think it's important to remember that most of the working class here, they don't vote at all.
Yeah,
they don't think
we're talking about elections,
politics at all.
We're talking about elections in a town with 165,000 people that like 8,000 people vote in.
Good stuff. I think we made some really good headway in this conversation, guys.
Yeah, I love talking to you. I love this show. It's great.
I was excited to be here today.
I didn't get a chance to say it because again, I wasn't there. I was actually watching live while you guys were broadcasting. But you guys are more than welcome whenever you want to come on. I love these kinds of conversations. Someone joked in the chat, Jason, give us the notes. You lived with that white family. They were not in the South. They were actually in the Bay Area. They're still alive. And I still have mail there, as they've let me know that I have to come back and see them.
We were going to have all 4 of the Hoot and Holler cast on today.
Omicron has driven us apart.
Yeah.
Man, this is great. And I'm really hoping that we can get by this COVID nonsense at some point. We all meet up somewhere, like, I don't know, create some kind of space where us, digital content creators, we should kind of have our own union or association, quite frankly. We've never talked about that, like, left media interests coming together instead of fighting and bickering and creating events where we can talk. There's an idea, Jason. We should talk about orchestrating that.
That's why I'm so tired, because I was up late last night with Djene Bajalan as he was, gallivanting around in beautiful Hull. And we were talking about how to get together and do this meet, because I did get a chance to go up north and hang out with Ben Burgess and Nando Vila actually in LA. And there was actually more people there that had took off because I got stuck at the border for 6 hours. But
Jason, I'm gonna think, why can't we have, and this is a lame organization, but why can't we have a Delhi Coast like organization or net neutrality, or what do they call it? The what's the convention that the bloggers used to go to with every year? But
they still have it. I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, but do that for podcasters and YouTube streamers. Like just an organization, right, of left content creators that we have, like we meet online, or we eventually go to meet space, we have conventions, so on and so forth.
I mean, we were talking about doing. I'll be totally honest, since we're
actually just content online.
No, we were talking about doing it in Atlanta, because that's for you and Djene and Ben and a few of the East Coast guys, and even people like Griscom. It's a little easier to get to. I think
it's cheaper in the Bay too.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Mexico right now. I'm hella south. I mean, I would love it for it to be here, because it would be mad cheap, but getting y'all cats down here would be a bitch. But we were talking about doing something in Atlanta. I actually know of a venue that would be kind of a dope venue to have it in. It's a really cool art space that I played out there when I was on that last tour in 2019. Atlanta's kind of an interesting city to do something like that in, and then talk about doing it in Atlanta, and then doing one in Chicago, and then doing one in LA. So that definitely is the plan, and we can have this conversation a little deeper online, Pat and Harvey, if you guys are serious about doing this in the summer, because we do definitely want to let.
I love that. Yeah.
Calm the fuck down. But
I did. I wanted to before we get too far away from it. We're far away from it, but somebody way back down the chat said Father Coughlin, and I don't know if they're still on the chat, but I just wanted to say that I did see that. That's really my big thing with evangelical right-wing radio going all the back to the 20s, anti-communism. So I saw the Father Coughlin, and I just wanted to shout that out.
Still checking it out. But yeah, Pascal, I know Atlanta's. How close are you to Atlanta today?
By car, it's about maybe 11 hours, but by flight, it's less than 2.
Yeah, it's nothing by plane. It's gonna happen. I'd love to do it in the summer, when Omicron kind of calms down a little bit. I know the summer in the South sucks. I've definitely been there. I'm from the Bay, so I don't understand anything that's not perfect weather. But I'm willing to deal with humidity, because I think this would be a huge thing for us if we were able to put it together. So let's actually start brainstorming and figuring out how we can do it and make it happen.
We need that fellowship.
That's right. Mutual fellowship.
Well, all right.
Do you have any parting words?
Listen, man, listen. Hoot and Holler. Y'all are righteous people, man. We got to hang out, come together again. When are you inviting us on your podcast?
Ooh. That's the $1 million fucking question.
Come on.
Let's talk about it. Yeah.
Someone says have it in KC for the barbecue. Look, I would love to go back to KC for the barbecue. I would love to go back. There's so many places I wanted to go see again. I miss fucking touring. I never thought I'd say that. I miss truck stops and fucking greasy spoons. So I would love to go back to KC. Hoot and Holler, Pat and Harvey, thank you for joining us. Do you guys have any parting words? Anything you want to pitch? We have linked your show in the chat, and it's definitely linked in the description. Wherever you're listening to this for the audio only, there's going to be links for Hoot and Holler. Please click it, follow the show.
I would start with our newest stuff. Don't go back to the beginning. One, we're very topical, so you don't need to know about the 2020 election in Taney County. And two, we sounded like dog shit at the beginning. I kind of figured it out finally. So
I was going to say, if you're local and you are interested in joining Southwest Missouri Solidarity Network as a volunteer, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook, SWMO Solidarity Network. And we have links on both of those social medias that will take you to a form to fill out to become a volunteer. And we will reach out to you if you want to jump in and get involved with us. Yeah.
Well,
If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm Harvey the Haint.
Harvey the Taint?
Harvey the Haint.
Like ain't with an H in front of it.
Haint. It's an Ozarks thing. It's an Ozarks.
It's a hill ghost.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a
Ghost
that hangs out in the holler.
Know what goes on in your house. We're clapping it up for your taint, for both of your taints. So thank you guys for watching. For the audio only, that will drop Wednesday. Thank you guys for listening. Now, please enjoy the capitalist realism of my Gen X youth by watching these cartoons over this music I made for my 3-year-old son. And we are out.